YouTube. And Administrator Johnson, if it's all right with you, maybe we'll get started. We always have a little bit of housekeeping at the beginning. Just saw Steve Witter join. I think we're really close.
Well, in respect of everybody's time, why don't we go ahead and get started, Deb?
Okay.
Deb, you're on mute.
I could have sworn I had that down by now. Thank you, Craig. I sometimes feel like you got to keep your hands up in the air so you don't turn it on by mistake. So anyway, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Interstate Bridge Replacement Executive Steering Group meeting. We have a few items of housekeeping that we'll get started with, and then we'll jump right in. So most of you have done these kinds of meetings before, but we just want to do a couple reminders, really important ones. Next slide. Which has to do with the fact that we have closed captions in English and Spanish available today. English closed captions are available within Zoom and YouTube. Users can follow this link to view both English and Spanish captions in a separate browser window at https://ibr.news/captions. Next slide. And to access the closed captions, at the bottom middle of your screen, you should see a menu of options. If you can't see the menu, hover your mouse over the bottom middle of the screen. You'll be able to see the icon. Click on the CC icon with a separate window, and the captions will appear. Next slide. Okay, and just a couple other webinar participation tips. First and foremost, we're so grateful to have you with us today, and thank you for joining us. We encourage panelists to keep your video on. Please keep your audio on mute when not speaking. Before speaking, please state your name and affiliation to help attendees identify who is talking. And if you experience technical difficulties, please contact the program staff at 360-329-6744. Okay, next slide. Public input instructions. So again, public, we thank you and appreciate having you with us. You will remain in silent mode until the opportunity for public input. At that time, there'll be an opportunity to provide brief public input later in the meeting today. To submit input after the meeting, email your comments to info@interstatebridge.org with ESG Public Comment in the subject line. You can also call 888-503-6735 and state ESG Public Comment in your message. I do want to remind people that any comments received up to 48 hours in advance of the meeting are included with the ESG meeting packet. If they're received within that 48-hour window, they are held and they'll be distributed after the meeting in the next meeting packet. So thank you again, though, for all the great public input we're receiving. All right, so now we'll move straight into the welcome and introduction and updates from around the region. So Administrator Johnson, glad to hand it over to you.
Well, good morning, everybody. And I'd like to thank you for participating in this latest meeting of the Executive Steering Group. This is going to be a very critical meeting today. We're going to put some items out on the table for you to see that you have not seen to date. Some of your staffers have seen and participated in help shaping those. So we're going to have some time for you to give us feedback as we show you some of the design options that have been developed. But before we get into that, I want to take some time to acknowledge and thank one of our team members who's leaving the IBR team. So Deb Noodleman, I'm going to embarrass you by saying thank you so much for all that you have brought to the table for this team and the great ideas that you have brought. And we will miss you as part of this team. So we're sad to see you go, but we understand, and we're looking forward to seeing your input in future issues residing around the IBR bridge. So thank you, Deb.
Thank you for that, Greg. And it's been a privilege and an honor to be a part of this very esteemed group. And I'm so impressed with all of you and the way you have leaned in to really represent the interests of your agencies from this region, and I know it will be a great success. So wishing you all the best, and thank you for that, Greg. Appreciate it.
So, and I'm just going to do a quick update because once again, we have a lot of information to share with you, and we want to hear back from the principals on the work we've done. So first off, I want to thank all of you who participated in our recent Federal Transit Administration tour. As many of you know, Nuria Fernandez came from Washington, D.C. and did groundbreakings for both C-Tran as well as TriMet. And she also took time to come and visit the I-5 bridge and understand what that is about. So a number of you participated, and thank you so much. It was a very informative meeting and some great conversation that went on. We're also in this time period where we are doing a ton of outreach to both your boards and commissions and other officials around the region. So we're busy. We are doing presentations. We were just this morning at JPAC making the case for amendments to move forward. So once again, very busy time frame, and we appreciate all the help that we're getting from folks who sit on those different boards and are bringing things to the table to highlight the necessity of the I-5 bridge replacement. So we are, next week, we will be taking things that we have shown to you and your comments to the bi-state legislative committee so they can be apprised of what this is shaping up to be so they can understand what they will be looking at in the funding picture for the I-5 replacement bridge. So a lot of important things coming up. But today we're going to discuss deliverables. We're going to talk about design options. We're going to talk about outcomes, desired outcomes. We're going to talk about screening criteria. So I'm going to flip it back to Deb to set up that portion of the meeting, and so we can move forward. So thank you so much for your attendance and attention.
Great. Thanks so much, Greg. I am going to do a once around the virtual table just to give each of you a chance to say good morning. Any updates you may want to share on behalf of yourselves or the program. So if I could, I would like to start with Secretary Millar and then go to Secretary Strickler.
Good morning, everybody, and wonderful to see you all here. And I have no updates, but would be happy to answer anybody's question.
Okay, Director Strickler.
I'll just echo the appreciation for everybody's attendance. I'll apologize up front. I am out in La Grande for some other team meetings with my crews, so I'll be in and out of video, but I am here and I am paying attention, and I'll be attending to everything for the meeting today, but you won't see the mask come off. Deb, I also want to extend my appreciation to you for all the work that you've done around this table. This has been great work. I look forward to these discussions. And as I look around the screen, thank you everybody for your time and dedication to this important project.
Great, thank you, welcome. And next, if I could go to the cities, City of Vancouver, then City of Portland.
Good morning, Deb. Good morning, everyone. First of all, I'd like to thank the program for keeping us moving forward. I know in the past meetings, we've had some concerns about the fast pace, but we're committed to working towards a wonderful solution. And I'd like to thank the partners because we've continued to have a strong collaboration and coordination. I know even though we have had our differences with how we assess the technical feedback, ultimately, I think we're all on the same page in getting this done. So with that note, I want to say that the City of Vancouver is comfortable with the program that the work that we're being presented with today for our consideration. And at 10:21, you'll see my screen go blank because at 10:21, on 10:21 is the Great Washington Shakeout for the earthquake preparedness. So just as we have fire drills, we have earthquake drills. So you'll see us disappear for just a minute and then we'll come back and survive the earthquake. Thank you so much.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Okay, and Commissioner Hardesty.
Good morning, all. I have no announcements, but I want to pile on to make sure that we can make Deb blush as much as possible and just tell her how grateful I am for all that she's done up till this point. And I want to echo Mayor Ogle's statement about, this is hard stuff. If it wasn't hard, we would have done it a long time ago, right? But I feel the commitment and the energy and the vision that we share together. So I look forward to what's next. And Deb, I look forward to seeing you and whatever your next opportunity will be.
Thank you. And it is true. I turn and stay bright red on a regular basis. So.
That's the advantage of being African-American, right? When I blush, it's really, really hard for people to see that. But, I can put on a good poker face. But I know you, the moment that you say something nice, your face goes purple.
It's true. I have always wished for that help. But thank you again. Appreciate it. If I could go next, I'll go Metro and then RTC.
Morning, Lynn Peterson, Metro Council President. I will just say a simple thank you, Deb. Much appreciated to all the work and look forward to moving this project forward. It is much needed and I agree. I think we're all headed in the same direction to be able to replace this bridge. We just need to make sure that the details start to play out the way we thought they would.
Thank you so much and welcome. And RTC?
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Matt Ransom, I'm the Executive Director at RTC, if I've not met you previously. Ditto to the shakeout, I'll be doing the same since I'm here at the office. And again, ditto, thank you, Deb, and all your professionalism and support. Quick 30-second update about legislative work that we do at RTC. So each year we partner with Identity Clark County, which is a business booster group up here to develop a state and federal legislative statement. We just met on Monday to approve that as a coalition. Now it's being released for public endorsement. This is public agencies and private organizations across both Washington and Oregon that sign on to this legislative statement. It's referred to as the Clark County Transportation Alliance. The reason why I mention that, not only is it out for socialization right now, and I know many of the organizations here sign on to that, this year's statement makes express a request to the legislature, which is to start to think about funding the IBR project. It is this year, as it has been in past years, the #1 legislative priority among the coalition. And I think, as we're aware, the debates in the Washington House and Senate talking about construction funding or funding at large is certainly timely. And so that statement's out. Look forward to the collaboration with our partners as we work that in Olympia and with our federal partners. Thank you.
Thanks so much and welcome. I'd like to go next, if I could, to TriMet and then CTRAN.
Deb, we've spoken. We'll speak again. Thank you very much. You've definitely been the glue that has helped us all stay together. And just continue to be here in support of the project and move forward with all the partners. And I appreciate what's been said before. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much, Steve. And Sean, are you here? I'm not seeing you, but it may be because I just have video. Oh, there you are. Hi, welcome.
Yeah, good morning.
And
I would just echo what the partner said. Definitely want to say thank you for everything you've done, Deb. You and your team have been amazing. I would state that I hope we're able to move forward at the pace that you were able to continue to push us forward with. You did an excellent job with that, and so big shoes to fill. I hope they're able to do that. I would agree with the comments that the mayor had, as well as Commissioner Hardesty, regarding, I think, the project. Teams are working hard to get us the data we need. I would say that I have concerns, and CTRAN has concerns over the timeline that exists in terms of some of the decision-making processes that are out there, specifically on IBR transit options. I know we want to try to make some of the decisions on that in lanes by the end of the year. I don't necessarily think that that goal represents a fair opportunity for the communities to be able to weigh in on some of those options, as well as for the transit agencies to be able to give effective feedback on what those transit options that are being modeled are and the data that's within them. So I think that's something that we're going to need to take a look at, especially on the heels of a bi-state meeting early in 22. I do appreciate the work that's being done behind the scenes, but again, I want to make sure that we take into account the voices of our community and the voices of all of the partners that are involved in this process, because I don't want them to get lost in our quest to meet a timeline. So that's the only thought that I have. Definitely want to throw a shout out to John L. and the work that John L. is doing. They do a fantastic job with the equity work group. And I appreciate the work being done. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sean. Great to have you with us. If I go next to the ports and start with Port of Vancouver, then Port of Portland.
Good morning, everyone. First of all, thank you very much, Deb, for everything you've done for us. You will be missed. I really appreciate your collaborative approach, your facilitation skills for sure. I mean, you have really kept us going. I feel like we've had great momentum, and really appreciate the work that you've done with this team. I do want to also thank the program team. There has been a lot of great outreach by the program team on the project, and increased activity with reaching out to the freight community, which is obviously something that is very critical for the port. So I really appreciate reaching out to those folks. We also were able to see Frank Green do a presentation to the Pacific Northwest Waterways Association, who held their annual convention in Vancouver. And this group really helps advocate for our waterways, and not only the navigation piece of it, but also the economic development and environmental components. And it was really valuable for that group to hear where we are with the interstate bridge replacement program, and so they could provide their feedback. It's remarkable how much we use our river system and for navigation and export of commodities from states across the country. And so I think just understanding where the project is and how to participate and understand where we are with that. So appreciate the project team for continuing to reach out to folks. And then finally, just what we've heard from other partners, really appreciate the collaboration, really appreciate understanding different perspectives and some of the challenges, and how we can work together to come up with a great project. Thank you.
Thank you. Port of Portland.
And good morning. I just want to add to everyone else's comments. Big thank you to Deb and the rest of the team, and your professionalism combined with enthusiasm, and I would add a little bit of tenacity, I think has kept all of this going, and we've just very much appreciated you. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And then to our CAG co-chairs, so our Community Advisory Group co-chairs that are also representatives here on the Executive Steering Group. And if I could go to Ed Washington first.
Yes, I don't have any comments other than to say that, Deb, it's been a pleasure working with you. And I've appreciated so much your integrity, your honesty, and your ability to keep 15, 20 balls up in the air at the same time. But I think what I appreciate the most about the experience with you is your strong sense of inclusiveness to make sure that everybody that's on this big bridge has the opportunity to have their say. So I hope that I'm sure that will be continued, but thank you for setting the stage for that.
Thank you, much appreciated. And Lynn?
Thank you. I would echo Ed's comments and also just say that I've learned a great deal from watching you navigate when it seemed that there might not be a path forward. You managed to find one and lead us all to it, and immensely grateful for the talent and experience that you've brought to this work. I also want to echo what Matt and others kind of alluded to as the Clark County Transportation Alliance message about priorities. And in many ways, Clark County learned this lesson a couple of decades ago, that if we speak with one voice, it's powerful. And when we speak with a fractured voice, it ends up derailing whatever we're trying to do. And I think that's an important message for all of us to kind of internalize as we go forward. And I think, again, all of us have been working toward that shared vision, but appreciate the ongoing leadership from Matt and his team. And then finally, I would just note that we did not have a CAG meeting in October, so we don't have any updates with regard to that. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. And thank you, everyone, for being here and for your dedication, and appreciate the kind words. So Josh, if you go ahead and put up the agenda, we will get through these last bits of housekeeping and then jump right in. As Administrator Johnson said, we have a packed agenda for you. There has been so much work going on at the program level, and today is a really important juncture between the work that's been done and the work that lies ahead. So today we are seeking concurrence on the IBR desired outcomes, on the screening criteria process, and a check mark for the preliminary list of design options. So we'll go into those in depth in just a minute, and we'll get started on that. And the important critical piece about what concurrence means, and we'll have a slide that will walk you through, is really for where we're at in the program. Is it sufficient? Is it good enough for now? As we know, iteration means we can keep improving, making things better, and seek more tenacity and alignment. I always call it kind of tethering the pieces together. But from where we sit for these pieces that are ready to move forward, can we look for alignment around the executive steering group table to be able to message through to both by state committee and others that it's ready to keep moving? We'll then give the majority of the time for that piece. And I am going to kindly request that people listen to the whole presentation, hold your questions, and then we open it up for group discussion. It kind of goes as a package. So it's nice to just kind of be able to hear it all. Then we'll jump into the questions, group discussion. And I will be heading once around the virtual table to ask each of you where you sit on these topics. When we finish that piece, which is the majority of the meeting today, we still have other important updates, incredible work that's going on in the program. And we want to be able to give some touch points on each of those, really just a tip of the iceberg at this meeting. We'll take a deeper dive on those topics at future meetings. We always leave 10 minutes for public input. We always look forward to it. That'll come at 11:40. And then as we wrap up the meeting, we'll look to the other important meeting topics that we want to put on future agendas, next steps, summarize, and adjourn no later than noon. So as I said, a packed agenda, plenty to cover. A couple, next slide, Josh. Meeting ground rules. And I know you know this, but that is especially helpful when we're at these meetings where we're seeking alignment, is honoring the agenda, listening to understand and ask questions to clarify. I always talk about that. Ask that important question, why? Why do you think this? Why do you believe this? What's the importance or value to you? Hard on the problem, soft on the people, addressing interests as much as possible, looking for joint interests and seeking common ground, and providing a balance of speaking time. Okay, and just before you jump to handing it back to you, Administrator Johnson, a couple of quick things to our audience. I know you know this, but you are all on mute in a listening mode until the opportunity for public input. I tell you early on that if you're over observing on the YouTube live stream, you need to jump over to the Zoom meeting in order to get in the queue to provide public comment. The meeting is being recorded, and so if people don't get a chance to be here or have to leave and come back, you can always go and watch it again up on the great website that the IBR program has. And then finally, all these slides will be available on the website after the meeting. And we always have a meeting summary that gets posted to the website within a couple of weeks of the meeting. And I think that is it. So I will hand it back to you, Administrator Johnson, for this, setting the frame for this important work.
So we've been talking about the program, and as you guys know, I'm a Johnny come lately. This has been a almost a quarter of a century conversation that's been going on in this area. And so we're at one of the inflection points for the program, where we're going to tell you the work that that not only our team, not only the IBR team, but also the partners who are joined with us in going through desired outcomes, screening criteria, as well as design options. So this is a collaborative effort. Although we're presenting it based on input from all of your staff members as we move this forward. So we're going to turn this over to Chris Regan and John Willis to walk us through these steps. And keep in mind that we're seeking your concurrence on moving these issues forward in the process. So I will flip it over to Chris and John.
Excuse me, before you do that, I'm just curious. Our interpreter looks like she's in a dark background, so I'm concerned that people who need that service might be having trouble seeing her. Is it just me that sees that? It just feels like she's very dark in that background.
Yeah, that's actually desired, Commissioner Hardesty.
Oh,
So
okay.
appreciate that.
Yeah, just checking. Thank you.
Okay. Good for you to check. Thanks for that.
Great. And my name is Chris Regan. I'm the environmental manager for the Interstate Bridge Replacement Program. Thank you, Administrator Johnson. Wonderful to see everybody here today. Going to talk a little bit about how we've been moving forward towards an IBR solution. And we've had these conversations before. We've done a lot of work with our transportation partners. And over the summer, there was quite a bit of work and focus as we started looking into screening criteria to make sure that we linked that to our desired outcomes and to program level performance measures before design options were developed and before we went forward. So as we were developing those desired outcomes to help us understand how we were going to look and measure program success, we also had to work a little bit with some design options to ensure that we understood what was the data that we need and how best to model so that we could move forward into a screening process. Today, we stand here and we're looking for concurrence on those desired outcomes and a screening criteria process, as well as a preliminary list of design options that John's going to talk about.
Thanks, Chris. I'll get into more detail on those options later, but just to highlight how they fit into the overall concurrence process that we're going to talk about today. The team has been spending time working with your staff, developing those preliminary design options, preliminary list that respond to the changes Chris mentioned. And we will be taking the time between November and December, excuse me, to screen those options so we can compare them with each other, which will give you the information and data and the community to start the process to identify the IBR solution starting in early 2022. It should be noted also there is a lot of work that will occur after spring of 2022, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more at the end of our presentation today. And with that, I'll turn it back to Chris to talk about desired outcomes and screening.
Yeah, so diving a little bit more into the details, and this is a big slide. But it's important to recognize, as our Administrator Johnson brought up, there are really three things we're talking about here. We've got the program level desired outcomes, we've got a screening process, and we've got those design options. And those three pieces really fit together and help lead us to consideration and recommendations to get to that IBR solution. So next slide, please. So with those program level desired outcomes, we've done a lot of work as the basis and foundation to develop these desired outcomes. We're pulling this from our purpose and need for the program. We've done a lot of work with climate and equity and investigated some of those desired outcomes with cost and financing. Those desired outcomes and measures are really focus on what the program is seeking to achieve and how to measure that success throughout the entire life of this program and when the bridge is constructed at the end, when the program area is constructed at the end. Again, it comes from the vision and values. It reflects our community values and priorities, and that's informed by extensive community engagement as well as our community advisory group. And it incorporates the work that we've done in the equity advisory group to create the equity framework as well as our climate framework. Next slide. So for those desired outcomes, we've worked with your staff and the transportation partners to ensure that we link those desired outcomes to our purpose and need and to the other values of the program. So all of the work that's gone into defining these have led us to short statements of those desired outcomes. So for example, travel demand and congestion, we have more people can move through the program area. I'm not going to read all of these. There's not enough time for me, but this is in your packet, and this information is also available on the website. And so you can go dive a little bit deeper and see the specifics of this information. This information also is tied to screening criteria through a screening blueprint, and we're working to finalize that to help us move forward as we advance to our screening process. But we have captured in these desired outcomes specific areas from our purpose and need statement. You can go to the next slide, please, Josh. And that includes the 6 need statements that were identified. Travel demand congestion, it include freight, transit, safety, bicycle and pedestrian, as well as seismic areas. For each of those, we have specific statements that we are going to continue to focus on and measure as we advance the program. Next slide, please. We've also focused on our climate framework. And with our climate framework, led by our Principal Climate Officer, we have had public listening sessions and extensive conversations with our partner and partner collaboration, because all of the work that you're doing in the climate arena needs to be reflected with the work that we're doing today. And we're doing all we can to reach out and grab that forward. We've also done work with our equity advisory group, and these are specifically excerpted from the equity framework and will be refined further by our equity advisory group. But these are products that help shape the desired outcomes of the program related to our equity focus. And then finally, our program costs and funding are critical components, and we've developed desired outcome statements for these to help guide us into the future. Next slide, please. So as we move forward, we've developed our desired outcomes, we've linked them to screening criteria, and we continue to identify those screening criteria and metrics that are informed by our community advisory group, by the equity framework, climate framework, by technical experts, partner agencies, community engagement, and those criteria and metrics are going to help us identify trade-offs and differences between those design options. We're going to use those screening criteria. Yep, go ahead. Next slide, please, Josh, thanks. To help look at specific design options throughout those program area to help us screen, identify those trade-offs and those differences, so that when we can fit those different design options together into one alternative, the IBR solution, that will be forwarded for detailed evaluation in supplemental NEPA documents. So next slide, please. To get to the heart of this, what we need to do is look specifically at a matrix of screening criteria that help define the trade-offs. So for example, environment and community health, efficient movement of people and goods. And for each one of those, we need to look at how those design options support equity objectives and support our climate objectives. This is just an example. It's going to move forward. And then next slide, please. And then the third thing that we wanted to talk about with you today was looking at the design options. We're working from our prior planning efforts with major program components. And then those major program components are going to focus on changes. Back up one, Josh, if you can. So Those changes that have occurred since 2013, including physical, regulatory, and community priority changes. And then we're going to focus on identifying design options in response to those changes. And we've done a lot of work to get those refinements, recognizing that part of that work is also looking against a no build option, so that we can see what those differences are as we move forward in modeling and data collection. And with that, that's all I'm going to say about that. I'm going to hand it back over to John so we can go further through this.
Thank you, Chris. Next slide, please, Josh. So Chris did mention the reason for the design options is really in response to changes. And I'm not going to cover too much of this because Chris already has, but it's really important to note that as we developed our design options, we did so in collaboration with our agency partners and being responsive to those changes, including understanding our current regional values and priorities as we work towards a solution. The design options were consolidated into the following program areas, and that's the way that I'll walk through those changes with you. It will be at a very high level. You have in your packet more detail on the designs and the changes and the list of those, but I do want to make sure we take time to touch on each of them, even at a high level. So let's go to the next slide. We'll start with the bridge crossing over the Columbia and the alignment. The variety of options here differ in constructability and bridge footprint. They include opportunities and trade-offs within each of them. They all include dedicated transit guideway and a wide multi-use path. These options will have more detail in the future as that work is informed by data, partners, and community engagement, and will determine additional details such as the bridge height and the bridge type. The three main options looked at here will be the 2013 locally preferred alternative, which included twin spans on that curved alignment you see below. As I move to the middle square, you can see another set of twin spans with a straight alignment option. And lastly, a look at a stacked alignment, which puts the northbound and southbound lanes of Interstate 5 in a stacked arrangement. And that alignment follows the straight alignment, very similar to the one in the middle box. Let's go to the next category. We also looked at downtown Vancouver. Again, looking at changes, the higher bridge for the I-5 corridor creates ways to connect into downtown. All options that we're looking at connect transit and multi-use path to downtown Vancouver. Additional analysis will be needed to identify how to connect from downtown, given the various river crossing options that are being looked at. And you can see two examples there, one of the locally preferred alternative from 2013, as well as some connection options with the stacked crossing. Let's go to the next slide. North of downtown Vancouver, you'll see that there are a variety of changes at the interchanges. Those are being modified with braided ramps and auxiliary lanes at Mill Plain and Fourth Plain, as well as some overpass replacements. It's really important to note that east-west connectivity for bikes and pedestrian connections will be included, and all of these options can be represented by the purple lines down below. And like our other options, the details will be informed by future community engagement, and we will continue to refine things such as intersections and those active transportation connections. Next slide, please. On Hayden Island and Marine Drive, as we go to the south, there are a lot of options there to consider different ways to access Hayden Island by foot, bike, transit, and car. And your staff at the staff level were really helpful in helping us understand how do we respond to those changes and what happens on Marine Drive from an options point of view. And all of these options, should be noted, include the replacement of the North Portland Harbor Bridge. And future design work will be informed by community engagement and additional details, especially in the connection of active transportation, multi-use paths, and connection to the 40-mile loop trail. You'll see the three options below: a full interchange schematic, a partial interchange schematic on Hayden Island, and a no interchange one on Hayden Island. These three main categories represent quite a lot of detail underneath and a variety of concepts that were brought to the table as we worked with our partners to identify what the options were at Hayden Island. Let's go to the next slide. I'm going to take a little moment to dive into the transit options, but before I do, I want to highlight some key points about the transit option. We are looking at 10 different transit options. The first one, the no build option, is really a tool more than an option that, as Chris mentioned, helps us look at evaluating the effects of the other options against a no build scenario. In this case, the no build scenario would include planned transit improvements in the area for the next 25 years. There is a bus on shoulder option, 3 bus rapid transit options, 4 light rail transit options, and 1 combination bus rapid transit and light rail transit option. For those options that are the high capacity transit options will all include dedicated space for high capacity transit between Expo Center and Hayden Island. They'll also include dedicated space for high capacity transit on the replacement bridge over the Columbia, and all will include express buses operating on the shoulder of the freeway where possible in the program area. And like all of our other options, we anticipate additional data from our partners and community engagement will inform details as we move forward. Some examples of those details include the northern terminus, transit station details and specific locations, and park and ride size and specific locations. Next slide, please.
John, before you leave this slide, I'd just like to take a moment to acknowledge that we have been meeting with both CTRAN and TriMet since June to develop these options, and it has been a good collaboration. And I understand Sean's concerns about having all of the data available for decisions to be made, and we are working diligently to get to that point where both organizations are comfortable with what the IBR solution will be and how we move that forward for design and eventual operation by the 2 entities. So just wanted to acknowledge the hard work that's gone into getting to this place, especially in the transit arena.
Thank you, Administrator Johnson. Yes, there is a lot of work and why we did want to take the time to pause. And I realize I'm going really fast, so I really appreciate that additional detail. Let's go to the options. I'm going to hit these again, like with the other options, at a very high clip. We have a bus on shoulder option that assumes CTRAN routes 105X and 101 will be operating on the shoulder in both directions in the area, the bridge influence area. Next slide, please. The 3 BRT options can be categorized as a BRT option from Turtle Place to Expo on a dedicated guideway, one that hugs the Interstate 5 alignment, which would include the Vine BRT lines being extended in a dedicated guideway from Kiggins Bowl south to the Expo Center, connecting with Max, again on a dedicated guideway. And lastly, a BRT connection through the Central Business District where the Vine BRT lines would extend via dedicated guideway from McLaughlin through Vancouver's Central Business District before crossing to Hayden Island with a terminus near Expo Center. Next slide, please. There are 4 light rail transit options, including the 2013 locally preferred alternative, which was light rail extending from the Expo Center to a terminus near Clark College, a light rail transit option, which includes 1 station in Vancouver. That would be at Turtle Place, again, extending from Expo north. A light rail transit hugging Interstate 5 near McLaughlin that would follow the Interstate 5 alignment from Expo to McLaughlin with, again, dedicated guideway. And finally, a light rail transit hugging I-5 to Kiggins Bowl. That light rail would extend from Expo Center to Kiggins Bowl in a dedicated guideway adjacent to Interstate 5. Next slide, please. We also have a combination option of dedicated bus rapid transit and light rail that meet in Hayden Island from Turtle Place from the north and from Expo to the south where it connects with the yellow line. And that would include a terminus on Hayden Island for both modes. Let's go to the next slide, please. I do want to pause after looking at all those options, talk a little bit more about our next steps. Our goal is to support transparency and awareness as we develop these design options through a series of community engagement activities, including most notably with our community advisory group and our equity advisory group, who will be a big part of that engagement, as well as online open houses, open house starting in October, a community input survey to gather feedback in November, and community briefings also in November. following up with the community working groups that were stood up last month for active transportation, Hayden Island Marine Drive, downtown Vancouver, and for multimodal commuters. And also for a freight focus group. This has been set up with, hosted by the ports of Vancouver and Portland, and will be held on November 19th to gather that all important freight focus detail that we need to continue to develop our options. With that, I will pause and turn it back to you, Deb.
Thank you so much for that, Chris and John. It was a lot to pack into a small amount of time. And I just want to repeat the fact that we did send documents out in advance to our audience and public here. We did post these documents on the website that we knew we had to go through at a really high level. And we wanted to keep the focus here on light touch with more time for discussion. So Greg, just to you on the kind of, what's the ask, if you will, and what's the interest on behalf of the program?
So what we are asking today from the executive steering group is to have conversation, to talk about what you've seen, what you've read in the documents that have come across your desk, to talk about the desired outcome, screening criteria process, and the design options, and ask questions. Have we hit all of the issues that you wanted us to hit in these three areas? Because it's important that we now take the next step of screening options and start moving towards a IBR solution early next year. So this conversation is key critical. Once again, one of those program inflection points that we need to make sure your voices are heard and reflected in the work. So with that, let's have the conversation.
Okay. And Josh, you could go ahead and take the slide down just so we get a little more space. Again, someday being back in a room around a table, but for now, at least at our virtual table. And if I could have just a minute with the setting the stage, you've probably heard me say this before, but a wise person once said to me, when listening, it's important to ask yourself, why would a reasonable person think that way, ask those questions, or behave that way? What is reasonable about where they sit on the landscape? Because the otherness carries value, and the opportunity to learn from difference and the opportunity to meld the value that you get from diversity of opinion and pushback, and you've all heard me say sparkiness, has the opportunity to create better output and better outcomes. And I think that's what this region, that's what this table, I think that's what this program has an opportunity to accomplish. So if I may, as we head the once around the table, anything you want to share about the kind of where you sit on the landscape and where you're either listening, learning, or wondering about where the others are at, okay? And because this is merely a point on a much longer continuum together. So just that reflection. And then I always have to kind of flip a coin. I was going to start, well, can I start with the cities? I don't know if I'm pushing you too much as you started with the introduction. So either Commissioner Hardesty or Mayor McInerney Ogle, would one of you be willing to go first, just where you kind of sit right now, and if you're at that concurrence place, and kind of share.
Defer to the mayor first. So she's a little senior than I as the mayor. Just in position, not in age.
Right. Yeah, you owe me big time on that. I wonder if we could just quickly go to slide 19. There's just one little thing there on slide 19. There's the chart. And at the bottom of that chart, it says, consider that fiscal responsibility across the program.
Hang on one second.
Consider is a phrase that we like to say in Vancouver, is squishy language. We would like our colleagues to consider changing. See that last sentence there? Change consider to ensure. That gives us the confidence that we will be ensuring fiscal responsibility, not just considering it. So a minor point, but it has a significant in our mind, a significant point to be made.
And Mayor, can I interject for 1 sec? When
Certainly,
somebody
Deb.
asks for something like that, if there's anybody that has a problem with it, put your hand up. Because in this kind of a venue, if I hear silence, it means people align around that and it's okay to do the check.
Okay, so shall I wait a little bit?
It just takes a second and I see no hands up. So thank you. And yes, keep going.
You bet. Thank you so much. And then going
I
into
did
the,
see a hand up. I don't know where he went.
Whose hand?
Maybe put it down. It's not on my screen anymore.
Sean, it was Sean Donahue.
Sean.
Sean's
Oh.
hand. Okay.
Sean's got to come back on screen. I can't see when his hand goes up. Drats. Is your hand up, Sean? Hi.
No, my only comment was that I 100% agree with the mayor and the city on that changing of the language. Sorry, I misread what we were putting hands up for. I thought we were in agreement with
I
the
have
mayor.
this weird opposite thing. It's like, leave it down if you agree.
Sorry about that. Yeah, that's my school tendencies. My bad.
thank you, Sean. Moving into the screening criteria, we agree how that process is being presented, but we just need a little bit more information about the timing for when that criteria gets defined, if you would. We're concerned that we won't have enough time for staff to come to a consensus on the criteria, and then for the ESG to confirm it, and then to actually do the screening. So just a little more information is needed on the timing. And then in that last section for the design options, we're going to need a little more definition, kind of in a general level of design. What are we aiming for? Because I know the technical details are emerging and that we'll be digging into the design, but we also need to know enough about that general level of design in order to gauge what we feel comfortable with, because we'll be looking at technical and political and the community support levels. So we don't need absolute color of the tiles, but we do need kind of a more definition about that general level of the design as we move forward. So all is good, just some refinement there.
Okay. And
So we
Chris- go
we
ahead,
have
Bill.
our team here to answer what we're looking for is your concurrence to move these to the next step today.
Yes,
So-
we're comfortable with that, Greg. As I said, just some refinement on the fiscal responsibility. We are comfortable that you'll give us some more information about the timing for when the criteria gets defined. And let's not wait too long in getting that general level of design, some more definition about that general level.
Okay.
Great.
Okay.
So Chris is on screen. Let's take a couple of these because I think answering some of these are great questions, may help everybody. So go ahead, Chris and John. Yep.
Yeah, just real quick. So our goal right now is to work to finalize those screening criteria over the next month and a half, and start it so that we can have in-depth conversations with our transportation partners, make sure that they are aligned, that it does make sense, and then move forward into early spring 2022 to get to our IBR solution. So there's some flexibility in there to make sure that we've got it right. And we're trying to making sure that we have those stops and ability to check in.
Okay, and then John on the design options.
Yeah, I would add, I appreciate the analogy of picking the tile color as someone who just went through a remodel. I do think we are trying to get the big what's and where identified on this program, pillars, if you will, of what we're proposing. There is a lot more detail to come, but in some cases we may need to, as we start looking at trade-offs, as we have those discussions late this year and early next year, as we look at trade-offs, our team may have to dive into a detail or two to help you all understand what you're agreeing on. So I think that's something I'll add, but I'll say as we move forward past next spring, we are going to be in a more robust design space where we'll be able to understand impacts and details that'll help. So we're looking to get concurrence on the process today, as Deb mentioned, but also from the design points of view, the big pillars and fundamental parts of the project that we would like to take into an evaluation so we can weigh each of the options against one another to see where those opportunities and trade-offs are. I don't know if that helped answer the detailed question. Okay.
Thank you. So Commissioner Hardesty's up, and then I'm going to go to Metro and RTC after that.
Excellent. Thank you, Mayor, for going first. And I concur with you. I think more proactive language rather than wishy-washy language is always better for me. So I concur with that. I also want to really thank the team, especially Deb, for really listening to the partners and driving the process just to really try to gain consensus around desired outcomes. I think that's a fabulous place to start, trying to solidify where we're headed. I'm also very excited about the intentionality about stating what we're seeking to achieve and addressing this, not only just with the purpose and need, but also really solving for climate change, equity, and project financing as really important steps. One that we've been calling for since early this year. And so I just want you to know I support the desired outcomes, noting the need for continued work and continued coordination with the Equity Advisory Group and ensuring that that group is just incorporated into everything that we do. I am just really impressed with the work that's been done. And I want to say, you're also asking for a lot of time over the next couple of months from all of us to really dig in. And I want you to know I'm committed to that. So whatever we need to do to continue to move this forward, the city of Portland is ready, willing, and able. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Much appreciated. And President Peterson.
Thanks. I think I'll just echo Commissioner Hardesty's comments on the outcomes and screening criteria. It's really important that we started with those values and outcomes. And I think that's where we're getting such good alignment from all of the parties, because I think we all see where we want to head. Just really appreciate all the listening that's gone into the screening criteria that then fall out of those outcomes. One quick question for staff. In terms of outcomes and criteria, I would just continue to come back to land use. I think that you all are very interested in that too, because this is an iterative cycle of we are going to be making a giant investment. And we want to make sure that we're accommodating of any growth, but we also want to make sure that that growth is the type of growth that we want to see. And so I didn't, in my quick overview there with those slides, I didn't actually see that. And the second is, I'm sure it's embedded in there. It wasn't specifically called out, and that's access for people and how we're going to be measuring access changes based on the scenarios. So those would be my only two quick questions.
And thanks for that. We absolutely, go ahead, Greg.
I was going to say, I saw you come off mute to address the land use issue. We have been looking at the land use plans to make sure that what we are striving to do fits into the context of what this area is and what it sees for itself going into the future. So that is a part of our analysis.
That's great. Is there any way to just hold a line for it somehow? There might not be a quantitative, but there's a qualitative aspect to that we could hold onto and just carry through.
And some of the work that we're doing, especially with our climate framework, is to recognize that our program can assist to make, giant strides with climate by supporting land use decisions and how land use interacts with the transportation focus in our program area.
Awesome. I appreciate all that. I'm going to ask the same question over again. Is there a way to continue to have the thread of that brought through in some way? I know there might not be a quantitative, but there might be a qualitative conversation to have on each scenario going in the future and just call it out as a land use screening criteria.
I will start with yes. I will answer your question. Yes. Yeah. The conversation that staff have been having is to recognize that we have desired outcomes, we have performance measures, and we have screening criteria, and we need to show how those are connected. And we also need to recognize that throughout just not only the program work for design and construction, but into the future, we need to show that we are making performance and then we've got ways to mitigate and other things that we can do to ensure those things move forward.
Thank you, Chris. And I really appreciate how your background has, through the months that we have all been with you in your office, that we are now in the fall colors. It's a beautiful display.
Good. It is. It's a good continuity. And Roger, your hand's up too.
Yeah, thank you. And it's still foggy in Astoria in my background, but it usually is. I just wanted to add a little bit, or at least get something on the table for people to consider. Lynn brought up a great point about land use and the relationship between land use and transportation. We shouldn't hold land use as static in this conversation, because if there is a physical outcome we desire to see in the corridor, we may have to change land use to make that physical outcome work. Yeah, and that what I've seen in the past is, the highway's wide. Why is the highway wide? Well, the highway's wide because the model said so. Models don't make decisions. People make decisions. And what's more important is, if we say this is the physical outcome we want, what do we have to do to get to that outcome? I want to make sure we're thinking in that direction. Maybe not between now and the spring, but as we develop this project, that needs to be on the table. Thanks.
Okay, and Lynn and then Chris.
I just echo that, and I think the difference in the two sides of the river is, one, City of Vancouver's done such an outstanding job with their downtown and figuring out how to get more people to live closer to where they work, and that's right next to the bridge. And on the other side, there's still a lot of vacant land, and so. Right. And there's a lot of opportunity for development within that part of the entire Vancouver, Portland region. And so being able to think about how to play with that in terms of workforce housing and workforce development and workforce training, all of that, ideas that could bubble up during this conversation could actually bring down the number of trips using the bridge. So thanks.
Appreciate it so much. And Director Strickler.
Thank you, Deb. I also want to align with the comments made by Roger, Lynn, and Commissioner Hardesty, because as we look at what the potential impacts for a project like this can yield, those impacts can be both consequential and beneficial. And as we look beyond when the project completion is done, I often say to our teams that if we're looking at a project being strictly the NEPA phase or strictly the phase that we're in, but we forget about the fact that the project is the completed project and it has a life as such, and even it goes beyond that, then we've gone forward in a short-sighted way. A project such as this really is that programmatic approach and needs to look beyond the ribbon cutting date to say, what do we want our future to be? And so I'm often finding myself saying the art of the possible is where we should be leaning in. And that includes the land use conversation, not just how land use dictates the transportation solution, but what the transportation solution can do to help support future land use for 100 years and beyond, because we all know we've been working on this bridge now and it's already over 100 years and it's dictated some of our outcomes for us. And so let's take in what we can and work with our partners in the communities to get a better solution out there.
Really great conversation. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, on this. Can I come full circle back to you, President Peterson? Are you then in concurrence with these couple check marks and requests that the work product as it is right now is acceptable enough?
With the addition of a land use something, whether that's, I think that something still needs to be discussed, because if we don't hold land use static in some or parts of all of these scenarios and we allow it to change in ways that we would allow, because we don't want to be held constant to the bridge that was kind of constraining us for growth, then it may be qualitative and quantitative. And I think we need to think about how we add that through line through from the outcomes all the way through to the screening criteria. But otherwise, yes.
So we consider that a friendly amendment. We will get language to address that and get it back to you in the upcoming day or so to address that issue.
Great. Much appreciated. Thank you. Thank you. And so I'd like to go to RTC next, and then I'll be going to our transit agent too. Right. Then I'll go to CTRAN and TriMet. Go ahead, Matt.
Right. Thank you. So RTC, being an association of governments, I just want to, again, set the context for the group or those watching. Our service area covers not only Clark County, but Skamania and Klickitat County. And like our colleague Metro, we have responsibilities in Statute Washington for growth management. And so I would agree conceptually with the conversation that was just had, and would welcome the opportunity to review that language given our roles within statute. For the question at hand, the three things that you're seeking concurrence on, I think RTC could agree on the whole that we consent to proceed. So let me offer some contextual remarks in that regard. So on the whole, meaning within the framework of the bookends of our regional transportation plan, not only for Clark County, but again, I want to widen the lens here. When we do our work, we are also looking at relationships, land use and economic development relationships within Skamania and Klickitat County. It's probably not surprising to those around this table that when we have our committee work in those counties within the Columbia Gorge area, and also with our legislative partners that stretch up into the Yakima Basin, which is a very important trade basin for crops and export commodities. The I-5 bridge, what's happening in and around the I-5 bridge, freight flows, commodity flows are part of their dialogues, much the same way that they're part of our dialogues. And I think it's always incumbent upon me and the RTC organization to have the widest lens possible. And so I think when I look at the desired outcomes specifically, very good body of work. It has a nice combination of practical and aspirational. Specific to the comments that I'm just making, I think congestion, freight, commodity flows, those are cornerstones of how we're trying to build infrastructure strategies to support our growth management and economic development plans, respectively. So I think, yes, let's proceed. I want to make a comment then just additionally on the finance. I really like this finance conversation here. I made some comments in my introduction about there's always a need, as you each know, to consistently pursue the monies. And I've never begun a project with all the monies in hand. It's iterative, it's developmental. And I think the statements here reflect aspirations of get as much from as many sources as possible. I think perhaps we all agree that that's a bedrock of this strategy as it may develop, which is multivariable, multi-source. The iterations of sizes of sources is yet to be developed, and I think has to be reflective of circumstance, opportunity, and so forth. And I think the language here provides the flexibility for that. Also, just one final comment, as an association of government table, RTC being more at the programmatic level, we're always giving extreme deference to the owner operators and the governing boards that really have to pull the trigger on the authorities, whether they be authorities for new taxes, fees, et cetera, to support infrastructure development. So in this case, extreme deference as the conversation goes to the bi-state legislative committee, given their authorities and statute, both for actual hard physical infrastructure and also their authorities and statute in terms of tolling authorities and programmatic descriptions thereof. So I think I just, again, for the record and the partners that I interact with, I think those authorities are understood and acknowledged. The same would be for the transit districts and their governing boards. They have responsibilities fiduciary to their organizations as well as the citizens that they levy against or in favor or in support of, as you might define it. And that there is, in fact, I believe, and so it's a statement as well as an assumption, implicit in this process of iteration, that there would be the opportunities for check-ins to ensure that the opportunities in fact do exist. The worst outcome perhaps would be to presuppose that somebody could do something when in fact they couldn't. So I like the way these are structured. The broad principle in and of itself, I think, would be understood by most, if not all. And I think let's move forward. Thank you.
Appreciate it, Matt. Thank you. Thank you. And President Peterson, go ahead.
Just a clarifying question, Deb. Are we only talking about the desired outcomes and screening criteria and not the solutions yet?
Well, I put them all three up at the same time.
Yeah, and we didn't actually talk about those from the beginning. And so can we circle back around, or do you want us to go back? Because in my perfect world, I'd get to circle back around, but I'd rather try to pause and catch up on it only as I watch the time. So if you want to say something on the design options, sure, go ahead. I was trying to do all three at once. Yeah, and I think what I'd like to do is turn it back over to Commissioner Hardesty, because I don't think that was clear to us. I mean, I just didn't hear it, and I apologize. I think we would
Yes, I was coming back. I was waiting for the second round as well.
No, you're good to, I don't mind at all that we catch up on it. What we were looking for was concurrence on the desired outcomes and the screening criteria process, and a check mark that we're in the right place with the design option. So go ahead, Commissioner Hardesty.
Well, thank you. So let me just be really clear. I'm the desired outcomes. I'm on board. Move forward. We're doing good work. I do have a couple of things I want to put on the record around the design options. First, I want to thank you really for outlining this process. It's always helpful to have a timeline to know where we're going and at what points we have to make decisions. But to make decisions on these options in the overall IBR solution, we will need to see how project components advance our goals and meet desired outcomes. To define an IBR solution that includes major decisions like transit mode and the number of highway lanes, it is important to advance options based on the ability to address climate and equity problems today, now. So my concern is that the design options for the bridge alignment and interchanges have been developed in a way that suggests we already know what the solution is to the problem that we've identified. So that's where I am at this moment.
Oh, I want to make sure I understand it. Oh, go ahead, Greg. Yeah.
If I could just make a comment, what we tried to do with these design options is capture the universe of alternatives that will meet purpose and need for this program.
Right.
And there are a number of other solutions that are outside of purpose and need, but what we tried to do is narrow this down to a palette of options that meet purpose and need, but also meet equity issues, also meet climate issues. So this is the universe in which we are operating.
Yes, I appreciate, I'm sorry, Greg, if I could just, I appreciate that, but I think here's the issue for me. I mean, it needs to, I think this project has to be part of the solution, right? To the problem that we have here in I-5, right? But it needs to demonstrate how it won't contribute to more 124-degree days like we've experienced just this last summer in the Lynch neighborhood in Portland. It needs to demonstrate how it won't contribute to elevated rates of asthma and hospitalization for Black and Brown Portlanders, which normally are the recipients of the negative outcomes of freeway activity, right? And I'll say activity. It needs to demonstrate how it is compatible with the now inevitable future, where we will have hotter days, more severe flooding, but are finally living within a sustainable carbon budget. I think it also needs to be part of the solution to our housing and transportation affordability crisis that are plaguing our low-income communities on both sides of the river, right? So again, I think that's what I think we need to see as we reflect on, are we really moving a project forward in a way where we can be confident that in the design options that we will get to explore, that we are addressing these very core issues. And I think—
Understood. Understood. And those things that you mentioned, and we have a upcoming segment, if time allows, where we're going to have both our climate and our equity principles speak to how these integrate and how their efforts are integrated into those issues that you mentioned. We are not leaving those on the side of the road. Those are full and at the front of our attention.
And Lynn.
Thank you. If I can just take Commissioner Hardesty's comments, just and maybe clarify kind of what we would like to talk to the project about in terms of the span of the scenarios that are being proposed, is to add another slightly larger bookend to be able to quantify what would it look like if there was a more robust transit, a more robust congestion pricing program, and what does that do to demand, so that we can actually see how that works and what elements are playing with what. And I think we're not able to identify how the two are related and how they work together, because we're putting too much into some of the other scenarios to be able to see how the transit actually plays out, or the congestion pricing actually plays out. So some of the assumptions also on tolling and congestion pricing seem too muted. So I think the question is, how do we have a bookend so that we can actually have a full, transparent conversation about how these other things do, and actually, in fact, do they impact demand? And if so, by how much, positively or negatively? So I think that's what we'd like to discuss with the project, and really to come back to the ESG with a proposal that works with everybody to be able to do that. That does not mean that we are proposing all of that. It means that we need to transparently and accountably be able to define that outer limit just a little bit further out.
So we will bring back to ESG the efforts that we are coordinating with the ODOT Office of Urban Mobility on congestion pricing scenarios on both I-5 and I-205. We recognize that is something that they are digging into deeply, and we recognize that has impacts on the traffic and demand that comes to and through the bridge. So we are working with them hand in hand, and we will bring a presentation back to ESG next month to talk about that very issue.
So I just want to be very clear as well. I really appreciate all the work. There's no question about that. You have heard, you have reacted. I think what we're asking for is that in the space of the solution set, that this scenario, we find a scenario that bumps this out just a bit, so that we can, because we cannot go back to our region without the answers to these questions and get our councils comfortable with whatever the holistic solution is. We need to be able to show that we've, and we've done this a lot in the region. We have basically heard ideas that some people have had, right? And tried to include that in the scenario, so that at least we have a way to talk about it. And because they're all relative, right? Every scenario is relative to the next. And so we just need to be able to show that relativity of an option that just pushes it a little bit more. So thank you.
Understood.
And to make that point a little finer, it looks like this is the Chair Peterson and Commissioner Hardesty show, but it really isn't. But I just want to make that point a little clearer. So if you think about, our goal is, right, we want to fix congestion, we want to stop the fender benders, But we want to also do that not at the expense of creating more hastening the climate devastation that's taking place. And we also don't want to send more automobiles into neighborhoods, right? These neighborhoods who have historically bore the burden of traffic violence anyway. I mean, at my earlier JPAC meeting, it's a consistent sad trend that deaths by automobile are significantly up, and it's primarily people walking in their community who are being killed by automobile violence. And then, you know, highway-driven urban renewal. I mean, I just think it's important at tailpipe emissions, particle matter. I just don't want us to get so stuck with the reducing congestion is not the only issue that these communities are facing when we talk about freeway activity, right? You know, the health impact is really significant. And so again, I want you to know I'm on board and I'm very happy about where we're headed, but I don't want you to go so far down track that you're not anticipating us having to answer these questions with our colleagues who you will want to be voting with us on these matters. And for our community, right? I can tell you that in Portland, we are committed to reducing vehicle mile travel and within the city of Portland, right? But we have to do that in a way that is equitable and fair and doesn't overburden the individuals who've been pushed out to the edges of our city by gentrification, right? And so just want to make sure all that's on the record. But again, I want to be clear, I'm happy with us moving forward. I guess what I'm just saying is don't forget these critical components as we continue. We got fast timelines and there's a lot of work to be done in the next couple of months. And I'm looking forward to doing it with you.
Understood.
Appreciate it. And Secretary Millar, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. This has been a great conversation and I'm glad we're having it. I'm going to go back to my, let's not fix the land use, because, you know, if you have a lot of single family housing on one side of a bridge and a lot of big box retail on another side of a bridge, you shouldn't be shocked that there's a lot of traffic on the bridge. So if our goal is to reduce traffic on the bridge, there's only so much the people who are designing the bridge can do. They do that in cooperation and partnership with the people that make the decisions about what's on either side of the bridge. So it is a dynamic conversation. I don't want to put too much on Greg's shoulders. He can handle it, but you know, to make this happen, there are going to have to be changes in how we organize our communities. And I know the city of Portland has been making strides in that for quite a while. The city of Vancouver as well. But just reminding everybody, it is a dynamic that involves both the transportation solution and the communities that transportation solution is serving, because the transportation infrastructure is not the end. It's a means to the end that you want to achieve in your communities. And we're committed to helping you get there.
So I'm about to keep going and I will go to TriMet and then I'll go to C-Tri, but I do want to pause to acknowledge what I was just hearing as a process person is be careful of what you wish for. Like, don't compartmentalize or silo these pieces, because you have to continually keep tethering what you're doing to why you're doing it and whether or not it is achieving the outcomes that you want to achieve on the landscape. So the power of this message piece, so everybody else, as we head around, we're covering all this at one time, is yes, we've got what we need that's good enough here, and how do we make sure that I actually, you always use this phrase, suspend your disbelief. I would actually encourage and honor the fact that we shouldn't be doing that right now. We need to stay real about what pieces we're putting together here. So I'm not trying to put words in people's mouth, but as I reflect it back as a process person, it's a really important piece here. Keep on checking for that. So I'm hearing that if we're not adding an edge that really helps us push the region, how do we know if we're assessing and evaluating correctly? Okay. Nobody's saying that's what we're doing right now. What we're saying is we need to be evaluating all these options to really understand best where can the region go. So just want to, okay, got it. Good, thank you. Roger, did your hand go back up or was it down? I missed this.
No, it's a process failure on my part.
You have not failed. You're welcome to the club. So Steve Witter, patiently, your turn's up.
Wow, this is just such a robust and meaningful conversation here. And I do want to sort of quote, if I could call her a colleague, Commissioner Hardesty. She is not the only one that is concerned about these things, and President Peterson as well, and TriMet and CTran. And the transportation and land use cannot be separated at all. And the notion that we're actually talking about how to balance the multimodalism of this to actually not have to build big giant bits of concrete and create more carbon, I think is everybody's shared goal. I think there's also realities of people make choices and then they need to we can't subsidize their choices either. So I think I'm really looking forward to our region embracing congestion pricing as one of those tools. And robust transit has to be one of those tools. And my business is not to talk people out of their cars, but provide them an attractive alternative. And so that's what I think, my partners at CTran are committed to that, as well as, the cities and the regional leaders here today. So, I'm on board. As Greg has said, the transit agencies have been engaging and the regional and our regional and city partners, but we've really been leaning in on this and since June. And this still is a pretty fast timeline that I'm concerned with. And so, I've said it before, we don't need to be in a rush to make a bad decision or make one that is, I don't believe in consensus as much as understanding and conversations. And I don't think everybody gets everything they want. And that's why we're all here, is to kind of do our best to have that balance. So I would just say, let's let schedule be our friend, but at the same time, let's not let schedule be our Achilles heel in hasty decisions. And FTA is a big funding partner for both transit agencies, and so I am committed to do what I can to assist on the FTA realm. And so I guess that's where I'll pause, and I'll turn it over to my colleague Deborah.
And I think I heard the yes, but I just want to do a little check. You're in concurrence about the desired outcomes and the process sufficiently.
I'm a yes with moving forward. I could give you an emoji if you want.
Okay.
Yeah,
all right, good. And I hear the rest of the words too. So thank you so much, Steve. Appreciate it. And Sean, to you, welcome.
Yeah, I would 100% agree with a comment that Steve made, that our ultimate goal at CTran is to be able to share space in the modality section, and that's our goal. We understand that everyone has a preference for what they want to do. We're not trying to force people out of their vehicles. We want to be able to share that space and do so responsibly with anyone who may use that interstate. I would say that from a CTran perspective, I'm certainly okay with the desired outcomes. To say I'm comfortable with the design options is probably a little too much of a statement. I would say that I understand the process that is taking place, and I'm okay with that. I wouldn't go out on a limb and necessarily say I'm comfortable with it. And I would agree with some of the comments that were made by several folks before me, especially in reference to things that we want to talk about in terms of climate and equity, and really how those things sort of fit into the current package. And I think it's important for the group to bring back to the ESG. A couple months ago, we talked about what the 4 options were, and how we would move along in this process from a no build to a complete redo. And I think as we continue to bring conversations to the ESG about climate and equity, and especially land use, that's going to impact those 4 options. And I think there needs to be a pretty robust presentation to the ESG about how changes to land use and changes to those things, how they impact The project timeline and funding is a function of the FHWA and the FTA. And those are critical because we're gathering a lot of public input. And I really don't want to take away the voice of the community, especially the underserved community that may be impacted by construction of the bridge. And the only way to really do that is to responsibly outline how a deviation from the original record of decision will impact those 4 options that were outlined as a function of federal highway funding or as a function of FTA funding within the project. And I think that's important because the desired outcomes, I think we agree upon, but some of the minutia that's within the desired outcomes will have a pretty big impact on both the timeline that exists in terms of decision-making, but especially the timeline that exists in terms of the project as a whole, especially in the realm of some environmental studies that would need to be done or other pieces of that. So that's really, to me, I've stated that I've had some small concerns over the timeline. I would say those concerns have escalated to probably moderate in reference to our ability to be able to take the good data that we're getting from the team, and they are doing good work, to be able to break that down and decide what pieces are important to us in terms of how land use is utilized on both sides of the river as a function of changes to the original record of decision, and especially climate inequity, because we know that's a concern for everyone. And the third piece for me as well is freight movement. How do those things impact the original record of decision, especially in real time? And we know freight has grown over the past 10 years. And that's a reflection of the amazing work that our ports have done on both sides of the river. And so that needs to be factored in as well. And so it's a lot of unanswered questions that I think need to be outlined at an ESG meeting rather soon, especially before we go to a bi-state with any decision making. So long story short, yes, we do agree with the desired outcomes. I would say yes, not comfortably. We agree with the design options that are being explored. We're going to need to do a lot more digging into those. I think the data that's coming out is good. I think we need more time to be able to digest and ask questions and receive answers. And I think I heard that from a few of our other partners as well on other issues specific to land use or climate inequity. Ours is probably specific to transit, but that's kind of where we're at.
Really helpful, Sean. And can I just pause on the screening criteria process? Good enough for now?
Yeah, I think for me, and I would say for the folks that are on the project at CTRAN, Scott and Monica and Randy, I don't necessarily think it's an issue we have with the process of how the information is necessarily being looked into. It's more of the timeline associated with our ability to be able to get back to those parties and get additional information we need, because there's questions we have, there's questions that Southwest Washington agencies are going to have for us specifically in those realms. And so while I'm comfortable with the I'm comfortable with the design process as a whole. I'm not necessarily comfortable with the timeline associated with being able to get information and ask questions with that, those desired outcomes in relation to the design options. So really, it's more of a timeline issue than it is concern over how the design options are being explored. So I hope that better clarifies.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. So I do have 3 hands up. I think I have about 3 or 4 more people to get to. I am still, everybody don't worry, I'm still going to get to the other important topics and the public input. I can do my last piece quickly. So I have Commissioner Hardesty, Director Strickler, and Co-Chair Valenter. Go ahead.
Thank you. I'll take 30 seconds. I've just heard a couple of people mention they don't want to move people out of their cars. And I just want to remind people that many people don't have options. People use the public transit because they have to many times. So it's not like we're taught. I think that when we build public transit, it should be for the people who need it most, not for people that have multiple options. And so I just didn't want to leave that sitting out there like somehow that was a real thing that, some people don't have cars by choice or by economic status.
Thank you. And Chris, then Lynn.
Yeah, I'll be brief also. I just wanted to really pose a question to Greg and team, which is, what we've seen as far as the design options is kind of the starting point, right? And as I look at these, while they look very fixed and finite, as you continue evaluation and perform more analysis on these, your ability to disaggregate and take the best of all and bring back the equity lens, bring back the climate lens, bring back the land use lens. All of those things are the possibilities that you'll be bringing back with the work as we go forward. And I guess I'm just looking for confirmation that that's the case. And then a reiteration, just simply the fact that those factors are important as we make decisions that go beyond the ribbon cutting. I know the team knows that, and I know you've been working on that. So maybe just for the benefit of the group, if you could let us know.
Director Strickler, as well said, we are taking all of these issues into account. We know that the IBR solution is setting 4 pillars, but there is a lot of detail that will be filled in with further data, with further conversations. So this is to set the boundaries of what we can do. And there's a lot of detail to be filled in, but the equity and the climate lens is going to be a tremendous oversight of how this program moves forward. We understand the immediacy of both of those issues in this region.
And so, Greg, just to jump in, that's also to say that as you evaluate each of those, if the impacts are too great or the benefits are not great enough, then that's a concept that's not going to advance, and that data will be readily available, not just to our teams, but to this group.
Yes, it will be.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, good. Great questions all around. So Lynn, then, Lynn Valenter, then Lynn Peterson. Yes.
Thank you. I'm not sure if this is the right time to address it, but I'm just going to jump in because I'm not sure we're going around the table. But with regard to the desired outcomes, this is clearly tailored to the purpose and need and community values that we had all collectively adopted and support. I just want to call out that we, the Community Advisory Group, as you all are aware, is a group of 32 individuals for representing organizations on both sides of the river, as well as individuals. And our group has not had an opportunity to see any of the materials. And so because we don't have an overarching organization, we don't have a ready way to communicate or take a pulse check. And so with regard to being able to affirm support for the desired outcomes, the screening criteria process and/or the design options, I'm just feeling the need to note that I will be abstaining because I haven't had a chance to check in with any of the representatives. And I will also note that I don't see anything here that isn't consistent, but we have people who are deeply embedded in care for very specific elements that they just haven't had a chance to see. And they were appointed to the CAG in order to represent those passions and those interests and that advocacy. And so without them having an opportunity to weigh in, I just feel like I don't want to roadblock it, but I don't feel like we can say, yes, we are on board as CAG because they just haven't seen it yet. Thank you.
So if I could address that issue, we had a tremendous push and pull on who to roll out this information to first. And we finally landed on taking it to ESG before we took it to the advisory groups. So we do have a little bit of churn that needs to go on with the community advisory group as well as the equity advisory group. So we recognize that, and Lynn, I appreciate the position that we have put you in. So I apologize for that, but it was the team's decision to take this to ESG first rather than the advisory groups. But the advisory groups will get their chance to look at this in depth in the November cycle.
Yep.
Right. And that's why, frankly, I'm not saying I'm voting no. I just think we need to abstain. And we don't have membership on the staff I forget, staff level group where they work through some of these things in a preliminary manner. So I think it's just a structural issue, but nevertheless, I think it's an important point. Thank you.
Yeah.
Understood.
So, great point. And then the only other process piece that goes with that is, I don't want to have to pull it up now because of time, but if people go back and take a moment to look at that chart, the inputs into the desired outcomes, a core piece of it came out of the document that was developed by the CAG, as well as resolutions, as well as inputs from all the various agencies. So we're really hoping, Lynn and Ed, that when it does go back to the CAG, that it is going to resonate. And as you said, I understand procedurally, it's a chicken and egg thing. So got it, totally got it on that piece. Thanks. And then Lynn, Steve, go ahead.
Thanks. I just wanted to follow up on Director Strickler's points, which are really important about the iteration, which is, I think, why we're asking for another scenario to be modeled that is heavy on demand management and light on these other things, so that we can pull apart these elements and see how they might play together as we iterate through to a final preferred. Right now, we can't answer some of the questions we need to be able to answer of whether elements are important or not, or how they play with other things. So that's why we're asking for this, is so that we have that ability to make that decision about what elements can be brought into the final design together that will actually work together. So thanks.
Thank you. And Steve?
I really try not to complain, and I really try not to criticize the team. But to hear Lynn Valenter say that she hasn't seen any of this stuff gives me real concern. And you're asking this leadership body to endorse something ahead of outreach to the appointed or designated community advisory group. And I just, you know, it makes me uncomfortable, and I said, not the way I would have done it. That's all I gotta say. And I think the fact that maybe we didn't, well, I shouldn't say we, I'll own this. I was not aware of that. And I think if I had known that in a little bit more crisper form, maybe we could have averted that. So thank you.
So I want to be really careful that that's why we chose the word very carefully. We had a stronger word earlier on, but because we were concerned that this hasn't made one full iteration, we dropped down what we're asking for to concurrence. So I hear you, Steve. There might have been a better way to make sure everybody knew kind of where else this has been. But I want to be careful that concurrence means, that's why we put a definition up front, like good enough for now, for the piece that it needs. And it's not an endorsement of a final product. It's an endorsement of a process, a piece that's in motion. It's got to go to bi-state, it's got to go to CAG, it's got to actually run its way back through EAG again to make sure everybody got the words just right. We're trying, that's why we said conceptual level. So I hear, I'm not going to push back and say you can do whatever you want with the words. I want to be a little careful of the what's the ask though. And Greg, help me if I'm, kind of pushing it too hard, because Lynn and I had a long talk about this before the meeting, and I go ahead. And Mayor, why don't you jump in too? I want to let other people speak. And
we understand the conundrum that we put especially the community advisory group in, because they have not seen this. And like I said, before this discussion, my hair was jet black and I was 3 inches taller before this whole discussion of where this fits in. But we went round and round, and it was a tough decision that we made to take it to ESG first. So I will take that upon my shoulders. But there was a lot of good reasons for it.
Okay, and Mayor, yes.
And we don't consider this the final at all. We consider this a rollout, and that this is the first step in the next pieces of work, the process. So Vancouver was very strong and pushed Greg, and Greg, we appreciate it, that before this hit the community, we wanted to see what the first rollout step was. So we'll take the heat for that if that needs to happen. But this is not a done deal. We consider this the first step in many different things, Steve. So we're in a marathon here right now. So we're working with it.
No, I appreciate that, Mayor. I really do. I just, just a different game plan than I'm used to, and that's probably because I'm not, always able to pay attention to every detail. Thanks.
Well, and I think you heard the important pieces. I appreciate your conscience in this space, Steve, and I think it's the inputs from the EAG, the inputs from the community vision piece. Those all were inputs into this document, and then we got to roll it back through. So I think it's awesome you raised it. This is all good. And Commissioner Hardesty.
And thank you. I very quickly, Steve, I just wanted to say, if we couldn't get elected officials to just in principle agree to move forward, it would have been premature to submit it to a community advisory committee. I've seen it go that way and go really, really, really bad because, right, you're asking a community for advice on stuff that the electeds don't support. So it could go either way, but I agree with Mayor Ogle. We did want to see what would be presented before anybody in the public got to see it, because ultimately we are the voters and the buck will stop with us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is an awesome group. The pushback's all incredibly helpful. Thank you, everybody. So I have a couple more folks I want to make sure to get through. Public, hang tough. We're going to get to the rest of this. To the topics. I think where I'm at are with the ports. And so can I go to Port of Vancouver and then I'll go to Port of Portland?
Thanks, Deb. I'll keep my comments very brief. I just want to say that I think it's important that we recognize, honor, and appreciate the differences between our communities. And I think that's the process that we're going through right now. I think that's what makes our region strong. And so I think that's kind of everything that's folding into what we're seeing in the process. I think the desired outcomes, the screening criteria and the design options kind of is trying to take all of that information and give us some framework to work towards. And we support the process and how it's been developed.
Thank you. So that sounds like a check mark. It's good enough for concurrence for right now. Thank you. There you are, Krista. I couldn't see you on my screen. Port of Portland.
Absolutely. So first, we'll make sure you can put it on your list, Deb. We concur that this is the right path. So I want to just add my agreement with so much of what's been discussed here. And that we recognize that we are working on a solution for bridge that is currently not working for our region. And just so appreciate the level of engagement and how hard we're all working and pushing and the dedication to keep this project moving forward. I do have one, maybe it's a more technical ask, but I think the through line has come up in this discussion as well today. As we get into the more technical aspects of this work, I think I would encourage that we find a way to have members of our different teams. So the equity advisory group, climate group, a liaison maybe from those tables sitting at the technical table so that we're not running these conversations alongside one another, but we're trying to integrate those conversations kind of in a more holistic fashion. I recognize these groups get very large and that becomes difficult, but I think that integration will keep us focused on just making sure the lenses are applied to every step of the technical process. So again, thank you very much for all of the hard work on this. And there's a lot to do in a short amount of time. So we appreciate,
So if I could briefly address your last point, Christian. Our principal climate officer and principal equity officer have full reign to be in all of these conversations, and they have seen the technical outputs from the team, and they are a part of giving input to them. But we will make sure that continues to be the path forward that we travel.
Thank you, and thank you for that. I'm wanting to take a moment for the CAG co-chairs, and I know, Lynn, you were concerned that I wasn't necessarily heading all the way around. So I'm going to go to Ed to see if you want to say something, and then Lynn, it's fine if there's anything else you want to add. So Ed, go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm going to stand with Lynn on her position for the simple fact that you don't need to have one group representing both sides of the river with different thoughts. And I don't have any doubt about what's going to happen. I think that, we're moving on in the right direction. And so I will stand with her on that, and until we get a little chance to see more. And I'm not really overly concerned about the end results. I think it'll be positive. So just want to let you know that.
Okay. Appreciate it. Appreciate all your good work and service. Thank you, Ed. And Lynn, anything else?
No, I just want to clarify that for me, it was more of a process question than a qualitative question. There's nothing that I see here that causes me concern or is, throws up a pointed discussion. It's just more that we can't speak for our members in the same way that maybe others can. And I know we're all deeply committed to community engagement, both with our own directors and boards and leadership and communities. And we don't have all of that. We just have communities. So we're just standing up for them. But I feel very comfortable about how we're going. And again, what we've seen from a preliminary standpoint is fully reflective of the documents that we have formerly reviewed and supported through consensus. So it's all good. And thank you, Ed.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you both. Very much appreciated. So then just as a wrap up, I just want to come back to Director Strickler and Secretary Millar in case you have any other remarks here as we're wrapping up this content review. Go ahead, Chris, if you don't mind going first.
Yeah, you bet. So I'm certainly comfortable moving forward, and I recognize that there's still a lot of work before us. And I think bringing some of that clarity, it will be helpful. My comfort moving forward really rests on the fact that more information is coming on those things that are really high priority for us as a combined region and as professionals that are trying to move things forward in a different way. I would say that we've actively been working as an agency, especially in the Portland region, to really bring a comprehensive conversation and solution to the work that we do at ODOT in a way that isn't just one project at a time. And so I think the importance of conversations around how does congestion pricing interplay and those kinds of things are really vital to the work as we go forward. And our job as the transportation professionals is to balance all the needs of a comprehensive future in the same vein as not spending too much time admiring the problem where we don't get to decision, right? So our job is to create that environment where we can have that conversation, bring the things that correlate to the table, have a good, honest conversation about not just the data, but the things that we've historically not captured as data. And use that to inform the decision making, and then recognize that urgency on the other side of having the information to do so. I think without the information, urgency doesn't matter because it becomes a blind decision. So I think it's really important that we have the ability to really carry forward the best aspects of each of these concepts as the team does their work to inform us just the conversations they've been having. So a long-winded way of saying I'm supportive of where we sit on all three aspects. Deb, the engineer in me, wants to give you a yes on all three. And I recognize that there's more work to come and more answers to come as we continue to probe on the important issues. So thank you to the team for doing that. And this has been a great discussion for me.
Went back on mute there. I wanted to say very much appreciate it and thank you. And then to Secretary Millar.
Thank you. And I'm also comfortable with where we're at. And I am comfortable with where we're at because it's the good work of the team, but that's why we picked them. They do good work. But I'm especially comfortable with where we're at because of the good work of my partners here on this executive steering group. You've dug into it, you've committed the time, you've committed the resources of your agencies, and that's how we're going to get to solutions that we can all live with. Nobody's holding back. And I very much appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you and thank you. Thank you, everybody. Such profound words and such important placing on behalf of the region. So very much appreciated, very much valued, and will make a huge difference as the program moves forward. I'd like to make a suggestion, Greg, that we go straight to public comment right now because we want to make sure we get to that. And then I'll see, I'm not sure ESG members, if you could stay even a few minutes after noon, then we could try to do the wrap up and try to at least be able to mention the last of these slides. So why don't we hop right into the public input section. And what I want to remind our audience is that if you're interested in making public input, if you could please raise your hand. If you've joined by phone, press *9 to raise your hand. We will call on each participant. You will receive an unmute request. Please accept it. If you're commenting by phone, dial *6 to unmute. Please remember to mention your name and affiliation. We'll allocate up to 2 minutes for public comment, but it depends on the number of comments because I'm limited to 10 minutes total. So I do want to be able to watch the time. The maximum will be 2 minutes each. If we run out of time and you don't have a chance to speak, please remember you can always provide comment after the meeting and we'll be accepting it. Okay. So let's see if my team could help me with how many folks we have with hands up, and we'll go ahead and get started right away. I believe it looks like I have 4, and I think I have Chris Smith first. So Chris Smith, if you want to join us, we'll get started. Introduce yourself.
Good morning. This is Chris Smith. You will know me as a member of No More Freeways, but the comment I'm about to make is my comment as an individual, not an organizational comment. I can see that we're headed for a hard choice between light rail and bus rapid transit. I wonder if it's possible to embrace a both-and approach to that. We don't know how we might want to operate transit 10 or 20 years from now. Why couldn't we have a dedicated right-of-way that could accommodate both buses and light rail as we were able to do on the Tillicum crossing? Do we really need to force a choice? Thank you.
Thank you so much for being with us, and thank you for your public comment. Next up is Bob Ortblatt. Go ahead if you want to unmute and introduce yourself.
Yes. I'm Bob Ortblatt, a civil engineer for 50 years. I'm a little shocked at the majority of ESG accepting the 3 bridge options. All 3 bridge options are massive, extremely steep and dangerous, with the half-mile elevated approaches that would have terrible land use impacts on both sides of the river. The IBR has eliminated the best option, an immersed tunnel that's based on an inaccurate and misleading report from WSP. This report actually should be retracted. They put the design of their revert under the wrong bridge channel or barge channel. Vancouver, British Columbia had competing bridge and tunnel designs for new Fraser River crossing. A tunnel was selected because it was less costly and had less environmental impact. I have submitted multiple public comments that are online. Please study them. I really think a bridge would be a massive mistake. Looks like something from the 60s. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for being with us, and thank you for your public comment. Next up is Douglas Allen. If you want to go ahead, unmute and introduce yourself.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, my name is Doug Allen. I live in Southeast Portland. I hadn't planned to comment, but when Greg Johnson said that his design options capture the universe of options that meet the purpose and need, I had to speak up regarding the Common Sense Alternative version 2, which was developed back during the CRC process and met the purpose and need of the CRC. And so obviously it meets the purpose and need of the IBRP, since the purpose and needs are the same. I sent you a rebuttal of the incorrect memo that was distributed at your last meeting, where I explained how those memos misrepresented and misunderstood and misrepresented the history of the CRC, and how the Common Sense Alternative version 2 objectively meets all of the purpose and need criteria. So if you want to drop it because it fails to meet the screening criteria, that's fine. But to just drop it based on misrepresentation, I think is a violation of the public involvement process and NEPA, and it needs to be considered because I believe I fully agree with your desired outcomes, and it needs to be advanced so that it can be rated against the screening criteria. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for being with us. Appreciate your input. Next up, Ron Arp, if you want to go ahead and take yourself off mute and introduce yourself.
Hello there. Thank you, Chairs Valenter and Washington, Executive Sponsors, Director Johnson, and Program Staff. I'm Ron Arp with the Business Leaders Group Identity Clark County. We are strong supporters of replacing the I-5 bridge. Our group co-leads the Clark County Transportation Alliance that you heard mentioned earlier today. We also work closely with the ports and private businesses through the Southwest Washington Freight and Commerce Task Force. We've heard that program leaders want to hear more from business, so allow us to fill that gap. The program office is now in possession of a package of 57 letters from leading businesses and organizations across the region, all endorsing replacement of the I-5 bridge. The bridge and its influence area serves as the backbone of our regional economy. With one span nearly 105 years old, the bridge is outdated, accident prone, and seismically vulnerable. It's time for an upgrade. Breaking ground by 2025 will definitely require cooperation, courage, compromise, and flexibility. We'll offer a few thoughts. We will never get a less expensive or less complicated opportunity to fix 5 now. It will never make sense to spend hundreds of millions to patch the existing spans. It will never be acceptable for choke points limiting the flow of freight, commerce, and emergency vehicles. It'll never be acceptable for Northwest's second largest metro area to allow traffic to stop 300 or 400 times a year on its primary interstate for bridge lifts. It will never be acceptable for a seismically active region to tolerate an antiquated bridge that lacks resilience, such as wooden pilings and piers anchored in mud and with hand-greased cables. The bridge is a gift from our past. It's now a gift for us to give forward for the next 20 years, welcoming another 500,000 people. It's time to build it forward. Let's fix 5 now.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate your speaking and your attendance, and thank you. So we have one public comment left. Sorry, I was checking the list, and it's John Lay. And if you'd like to go ahead and go off mute and introduce yourself. Hi, John, are you here? Looks like he's still on mute, team. I don't know if we can help.
Can you hear me now?
There you go. Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. John Lee from Camas. People's overwhelming concern is time. Time is their most valuable commodity, and their largest frustration with regards to transportation is the amount of time they spend stuck in traffic and traffic congestion. In the grand scheme of things, the I-5 corridor is congested about 12 hours a day. That is what people want reduced. There's been an awful lot of great discussion on a host of huge topics, but very little about how much traffic congestion will be reduced by this project. And that should overwhelmingly be the focus of what this project delivers for the people. It's nice to improve climate, it's nice to improve equity and all those things, but everybody wants to save time. That is what they value and cherish the most. Finally, the people who are going to be paying for this would love a cost-effective solution. So I want to applaud Vancouver Mayor McInerney Ogle for emphasizing the importance of a cost-effective solution. Thank you very much for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being with us. And thank you to our audience, all of you, for making the time, for finding space, and for contributing and leaning in so deeply on this process. It adds incredible value and richness overall. So what I'd like to do, Greg, if this is okay with you, is I think I'll have Josh just kind of flash up the slides that we would have spent about a half hour going through. I don't know that we can do them justice if we even have our speakers try to take the time, and I'm concerned. I know our ESG members will be needing to move on in a couple minutes. So if it's okay with everybody, there's lots of good information on the slides. At the next meeting, we were intending to be taking a deep dive on all these topics anyway. Is that all right with you, Greg? And I'll just kind of walk them through and then team with you for the wrap up, okay? Yep. So just next slide, Josh. Today, all we wanted to do is be able to share I can only do this all with pride, just the great work that's been going on with the Equity Advisory Group. There's a lot, it meets monthly, and there's a list here of the recent work and also what's coming up. And then next slide, similarly, just with pride on advancing climate in the IBR program, and a list of the deep dive on really important topics that have all been critical to moving all of these programmatic elements forward. Again, both of these are going to be on next month's agenda, queued up with a good chunk of time for both, to not just fill you in on all the good work going on, but engage in a dialogue with all of you about helping to advance those interests. So next slide. And then there's, for the Community Advisory Group, as our co-chair said, they did not have a meeting last month. So there's updates here on the work that has been going on, and then a meeting coming up both early November and early December, helping to move significant program elements forward. Next slide. And then in recent and upcoming community engagement, we really hope that everybody's always checking the website. There have been 9 elevating equity listening sessions. There have been low barrier, small scale grants that have been awarded in the past month. And this part I'm taking just a second because it is time sensitive. There were both 4 community working groups launched, as well as extensive fall community engagement effort that's also going to be happening over these fall months. So please hop on the website, everybody. October had a really full list of activities, and there's more to come November and December. So hoping everybody can go look, find out what's going on, and jump right in and attend. And then next slide. And so we'll save the questions unless there's a burning issue or something, a clarifying question, I'll pause. Again, all these slides will end up on the website. Josh, I do want to keep the slide deck up because we're going to jump right on to the next steps now, if you don't mind. And Greg, I wanted to team with you on this next one. There is so much more work going forward, and we know we have you really dedicated into now through March, but each of you has asked at various occasions about, and what about after March? So we just put together a high level list, and maybe just mentioning the importance of all these components that have work going on now and will continue to do so, Greg.
So yeah, we know that the IBR solution creates some boundaries of what is going to be built, but we know there's a lot of details in that. And in the upcoming months and the upcoming years, so these are some of the things that we will be working on and bringing before this group and others to weigh in. The tolling and pricing details and discussion is going to be an ongoing discussion. We're looking to form groups to talk about what that looks like. Community workforce agreements or community benefits agreements. We're looking at starting that conversation. Contract requirements, DBE goals, all of those things are still issues that are important to what this program and how this program will be constructed. And those conversations are not forgotten, but they are important to us, and we will be engaging in those.
Thank you, and thank you. So more to come on all these very important topics. And then finally, one wrap-up slide for next steps. So as mentioned at the next meeting, so your November meeting, remember November 18th, 10 to 12, equity and climate work product is top on the agenda. So deep dive on both of those topics. Also progress on the screening process for evaluating design options, and more on the what it means to be moving towards the IBR solution in spring 2022. So all big important topics queued up for November and likely to continue into the December meeting. There is a proposal, I'm just going to mention it here, that consider extending your meetings in January, February, March, just for the opportunity to spend more time in dialogue with each other. I think today's an example. I wish I had another hour with all of you for sure. And it just always seems to go so fast. There's just a lot of great brains on this team and having a chance to really engage deeply on dialogue. So there's just an idea out here of thinking of 3-hour meetings for those January, February, March, while you've got a lot to consider together. And then we do have lots of action items from you. So a reminder to this group and to the audience listening, we'll have a meeting summary, we'll have action items coming out after, and this slide deck goes right up on the website at the close of the meeting. So we appreciate you staying on these extra few minutes. I do want to finish where we started with thank you and appreciation for this group, and then turn it back to Greg to close.
So once again, this was a very meaty meeting. So a lot of great discussion. So thank you. We're going to talk more about the time issue and why time is so critical. One of the reasons that I was brought here, and any program manager, the 3 basic elements are time, scope, and schedule. So, or cost, scope, and schedule. So we are keeping those at the forefront, along with other important issues that are informed by our partners. So once again, we hear you. We know that we are pressing forward, but we're pressing forward for a reason. So thank you so much, and everybody have a great rest of your day.
Deb, thank you so much. We so appreciate all of your work.
Thanks, Deb. Take care.
Thanks, Deb.
Thanks, Deb.
Thank you, Deb.
Thanks, Deb, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.